St. Paul's was dustier than any of the other churches I attended. The space under the pews and the window sills in the basement never seemed clean. Maybe this was because some of the church ladies dragged the vacuum cleaner through the sanctuary themselves. Then again, most of the churches I knew were cleaned by their members. Maybe all the churches in my childhood were just as dirty and I never noticed. By the time I left St. Paul's to attend other churches, I spent a lot less time crawling on the floor. One Sunday at St. Paul's I dropped a jujube under the pew. It was a red one, my favorite flavor, and so I crawled after it, leaving the princess coloring book June Petty had given me on the gnarled red seat. The green velvet over my knees turned gray, and when I emerged, having retrieved it from between Mrs. Petty's banana yellow heels, I had a run in my hose. I was always getting a run in my hose. I was a greedy child, but that was no fault of my parents, I think. My brother and sister knew when to stop and when to wait their turn. When I sat in the back row pew with Mrs. Petty, I always ate more of her candy than I was allowed, slipping my hand back into the box between hymns while she stood to recite the liturgy. Mrs. Petty's pew was in the back row because she recorded Sunday service. The tape recorder sat on a wooden box midway down the pew, and beneath the wooden box was a space just large enough to hold a small box of candies, jujubes and jelly beans usually. My brother and sister never sat with Mrs. Petty. Maybe it's because pastors' children each had a week in the month to sit with June, and I was the pastor's goddaughter, that I got to too. Sometimes I'd sit with Mrs. Petty and her husband alone. Other times my godsister Victoria and I would sit together, coloring, eating jujubes, and trying our best to sing along with the hymns and pipe organ. The organ was the loudest in that back row, with the choir loft overhead. After service, most of the congregation wouldn't stay. They'd shake pastor's hand and disappear through the heavy leather doors down the front steps of the church. Victoria and I would hurry down the back staircase, sometimes balancing on a dangerous ledge before leaping to a lower part of the stairs and rushing across linoleum tiles to the counter by the kitchen where broken chocolate cookies and weak apple juice waited for coffee hour. If the grown-ups would let us, we'd shimmy up onto the ledge near the windows to eat. It was while sitting on the ledge that I once knocked my juice and sent the glass shattering to the floor. Who gives a 7-year-old a real glass? Plastic cups were only used at the summer picnic. When we couldn't sit on the ledge, we'd pick the benches near the coat room. One Sunday, while eating a chocolate cookie there, I dropped part of it. Thinking I'd located the broken crumb, I picked it up and put it in my mouth, only to realize that it was, in fact, a bit of dried mud, likely thrown loose from the grooves of a shoe or boot as someone sat down to change into indoor shoes. In the early years, after a few cookies, I'd join the other kids running through the classrooms and nursery in the education wing for a game of hide-and-seek or tag. During one game of hide-and-seek, the other kids, including my brother, forgot to find me, which made me feel clever at the time. One Sunday, when two of the older boys were throwing their shoes against a vinyl dividing curtain in the nursery to see if they could create scuff marks, a black shoe crashed through the window. With excitement, I ran to tattle to Pastor because I was that kid. Sometimes we'd bang on the piano keys in the youth room, or find office chairs and spin until we got dizzy. Sometimes Victoria and I would sneak into her dad's office and steal round mints from the glass bowl beside the bust of Martin Luther, and she'd tell me ghost stories about the bell tower. In the later years, when most of the families with kids had left the church, my brother and I would hurry the block and a half home after a cookie or two to start cooking our ritual Sunday ramen lunch. One Sunday, with everyone in the family leaving church at different times, my parents forgot my 5-year-old sister in the education wing. They'd each assumed she'd gone home with someone else. I don't recall which of my parents rushed back. I was too busy eating ramen. I like to think my sister was playing in the nursery and didn't notice. On the other hand, she may have been wandering through empty rooms in confusion, searching. One Sunday, when I was 12, we stopped going altogether. Against my will, I was done with confirmation class, done with my godparents, and done with jujubes in the back pew. Suddenly, the theology I'd been told was wrong was right, and the theology I'd been told was right was wrong. Was the book of Revelation literal or allegorical? Was my baptism as a baby correct, or did I need to be baptized again as an adult? Could women stand in the pulpit or not? Was it really a proper communion when you used grape juice instead of wine and rice crackers instead of wafers? Before long, I was done with theology altogether. In my teenage years, when I struggled with belief and sexuality, sometimes I'd take walks and wander by St. Paul's, trying to picture each room in my mind, walking myself through my childhood, from the sanctuary to the altar, through pastor's office, and to my mom's old office, where every Friday the thick smell and heat of the photocopier printing out Sunday's bulletins had filled the room. One Sunday, when I was 15, I went in and hovered at the back until my godsister Elena saw me and beckoned me into the pew with June Petty. I was a shaking, shy, greasy-haired 15-year-old in a leather jacket and jeans. The liturgy was familiar and comfortable, but the sanctuary was smaller and dimmer, and I felt like a spectacle in that small congregation. Afterwards, as I headed out the heavy leather doors and down the church steps, I tried to tell my godfather, as he shook my hand, how it was my sister's 12th birthday, and how we were going to the missionary church now, and how I missed them all. But the tension hung in the air as if it was me, the child who had walked out and slammed a door. After that, I guess it was me.